Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good few different styles, but if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're best known for their different kinds of IPAs. We've had many New Englands from them, a good few black IPAs and West Coasters as well, and they always tend to be pretty damn solid. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I know these guys can do very well. This is also the second beer from a kind of two-part release they did this month, and the last one was actually really quite interesting and quite different compared to beers in this style category that we've had from them before. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. But for this review, we are going to go to the Gamlestaden area and we're returning to Spike Brewery. So this particular beer is called the Wokealist. It comes in at 6.4% ABV, and this is another New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this beer was released as part of the Lokalt och Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for February of 2022, and like I said, this was one of two beers that they released this month. The other one was called the Satanarchist, and we reviewed that a couple of videos ago, and that was really quite interesting, a very kind of farmhousey and grainy sort of New England IPA. So like I said on the last one, or like I said a minute ago I should say, I'm very curious to see whether this one carries on in the same vein as that beer. But yeah, let's crack on and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Spike Brewery before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on the geography tagging system. So just go to the homepage, use the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, province, whatever in there, and if I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries and you will find this one in the Swedish playlist. There are playlists from many different countries, so go and have a look and see what's there and see what tickles your fancy. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about Spike Brewery. So, Spike Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded back in 2014 by Mats Westberg, Marcus Axberg and Martin Johansson. So all three of these guys have previously worked in the IT industry, but it's now only Mats and Marcus who are still active in the company, but they're now joined by David de Sursi, who joined the company and became the CEO a few years in. But the main brewer until March of 2021 was Bernardo Gava, who came from Brazil, and he trained in brewing at the VLB Institute and joined the company in 2017. But for the moment, these guys are producing around 250,000 litres of beer per year, and quite a significant percentage of their volume historically has been used for contract brewing other breweries' beers. But the brewery itself can be found in the old Slakthus in the Gamlestaden area, and in their original brewery they had an on-site tap room which was opening on Saturdays and also served food on occasion as well. But they announced in November of 2021 that they were going to move to another unit just across from the first brewery. They've now moved in there for the most part, and this new brewery, when it's fully operational, will have the ability to brew 500,000 to 600,000 litres of beer per year, and they're also going to have a 150-seater restaurant in there too. And like I say, this is nearly up and running from what I've seen. There hasn't been anything about a grand opening of this restaurant yet though, so there are things still in progress there. But the current head brewer is Carl Janrud, who previously worked for Beersmiths, and he also worked under Bernardo Gava as well, and he's releasing quite a few different things. But they have got a couple of new guys into the brew team recently from what I understand, and these two IPAs that they've released this month have been from one of the the kind of junior brewers, if you like. So these have been quite interesting to try because, like I said, they're a bit different compared to what we've had before. But as of February 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, 2023, sorry, forgetting that. As of February 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 150 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and they will no doubt continue to expand that number over the next little while. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about Spike Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the Brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a wee look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork once again before we open this one up. As you can see, the artwork on this is quite similar to what we had on the Satanarchist, but it is a wee bit different from what we've seen from Spike Brewery before. There you can see the Spike Brewery symbol on the bottom of the can. It tells you a little bit about the ingredients on the side of this one as well. Like I said earlier in the video, this is a 6.4% New England Hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. The hops in this one are Citra, Mosaic and Mandarina Bavaria. We've encountered all of these before. Citra and Mosaic are of course both American, both about 14% alpha acid. Citra is going to give you some nice juicy mango notes, a good little bit of lemon lime, and sometimes a wee bit of a stronger kind of passion fruit and grapefruit note. Mosaic is going to give you that big oily tangerine, whereas Mandarina Bavaria is a German hop, 8% alpha acid, so a bit higher than normal, and that's going to give you this really nice oily orange character, but also the lovely German noble green components. But yeah, this does look really very, very nice. But yeah, they've got a little link on here for Support Your Fighter Brewer Battle, so I need to have a wee look at that again and see what the brewer's name is, because I think the other one was brewed by Risa, and I forget who this one was brewed by. But like I said, these two IPAs have been brewed by the different brewers working at Spike Brewery. But anyway, this one is a 440ml can. I believe this beer cost me about 50 Swedish kroner, so that is €5, somewhere in the region of £4.50 sterling, $5.50 American. But yeah, the Wokealist, a 6.4% New England Hazy IPA. Let's get this guy out, we'll get on with the tasting and see what it's all about. Very, very curious about this beer, so let's do this. So the Satanarchist, as I said a little bit earlier on in the video, was a little bit more of a kind of farmhousey and yeasty leaning New England IPA. So we'll need to see what this one is going to offer us. But you can see that this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect from a New England Hazy IPA. So before the head disappears on this one, we can say it's poured with just under a finger of quite a bumpy but slightly cream coloured head. I'll just let you have a wee look at that before we actually get on and taste the beer. You can see quite a few big size bubbles in there and a few bumps, but yeah, it does look pretty nice actually. So in terms of the colour of the beer, I would say that this one is you know, kind of like a mango juice colour, maybe a slightly mixed tropical fruit juice note. But yeah, I always like comparing the colours of these New England or hazy IPAs to different fruit juices, because that's really just what the colour of these beers reminds me of. This one is certainly not the soupiest and gloopiest of New England hazies that you're going to look at. It's more along the lines of an American IPA in terms of its appearance. But yeah, remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer as well. But yeah, you don't often have to care about those 2 variables when it comes to different kinds of IPAs. But yeah, this one looks kind of more like an American IPA, I would say. You can see it's got a little bit more of that kind of natural haze to it rather than being soupy and gloopy. So normally in New England IPAs, the level of haze depends on the oak content, the wheat content, and to a degree the yeast. There's not really any rule about, going up the alcohol scale, you should have more haze. It doesn't really work like that. It can vary from brewery to brewery and beer to beer. But certainly, when it comes to appearance, this strikes me as more of a kind of American IPA rather than a New England. But it contains oats and wheats, and that is usually one of the definitions of a New England IPA anyway. But it looks good. As long as the beer tastes good, that is the main thing. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation in this one. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the bottom of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there, but overall it does look very, very nice. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma of this beer and see what it's all about. I'm very curious about this one. Oh yeah, this is quite interesting. So straight away, like I said, the Satanarchist was a very kind of, it was a very sort of yeasty and more farmhousey affair. This one has definitely got a little bit more, it's a little bit more kind of classic, if you like, in that sense. It's a little bit more what I'm familiar with from Spike Brewery. I'm certainly seeing that this one's a bit more, it does have a little bit of yeasty character to it in fairness, but it's got a wee bit more kind of barley malt, a bit of oatiness, and a bit of wheatiness in there. You can smell these 3 components of the malt base just kind of coming together in this one. The green component, I would say, is quite nice and light and bright. You've also got a bit more of an oily, fruity character. So I will say this beer is quite different from what I remember the Satanarchist being. So yeah, that's quite interesting. As I've said in many a review before, when it comes to New England hazies, for me there are 6 different elements to think about. So you can have the kind of farmhousey, yeasty character. You can also have the rye and grainy side of things. Those tend to be a wee bit more prominent in American brewed New England IPAs though, but then you've also got barley malt bread, wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, and also a kind of sweet component as well. So yeah, these are the 6 different elements of flavour to think about in these beers. But let's try and break the aroma of this one down a wee bit more and just describe it for you a little bit more kind of in depth, if you like. But it does smell nice, as I say. So the backbone of this beer, I would say the backbone of this one is a little bit more, you do have a little bit of that kind of fresh white bready bread crust. There's a little touch of woodiness in there and also a wee bit of Jacob's cream cracker, but the bread crust does kind of shine through a wee bit more. On top of that, you do get a little bit of Jacob's cream cracker. You can smell that little bit of dryness in there. I'm also getting a wee bit of a kind of wholemeal, brown bready type character as well. Fresh white bread. And yeah, the fresh white bread from the barley malt, but you can also smell a slightly denser wheat. The wheat in this one is being a little bit more of a kind of smoothing agent for sure, rather than being too kind of bitey. There's a little tiny bit of bitiness there from the wheat in the back of the nose, but overall I would say that the wheat is really smoothing everything out in this beer. So yeah, that's worth keeping in mind for sure. But on the on top of that, you can definitely get a little bit of the oaty character, and for me, the oats in this beer are actually kind of dry, and as I've said in many a New England review before, for me the oats are always a good indicator of how fresh the beer is. So the drier the oats are in the beer, the older it is, the less fresh essentially, but the more creamy the oats are in the flavour and aroma, the fresher the beer is going to be. You can smell with this beer, I think this one is maybe about 6 weeks to 2 months old in the can, and you know, it's just an unfortunate thing with the Systembolaget system. These beers should be getting out there a good little bit quicker than they are, but you can smell that the oats in this beer are a little bit drier and potentially the beer is just that little bit older. But yeah, you do get a little bit of sweetness out of this one. There's a wee touch of that Werther's Original butter candy sort of thing coming out of it. Not too much in the way of biscuit, just a little bit too. So the malt base in this one is kind of interesting, but like I say, this is quite a different beer to the Satanarchist. It's a lot less yeasty in my opinion, and a wee bit more about the kind of oats and wheat and the barley malt. So yeah, worth bearing in mind in that sense. So yeah, I do like how this goes together from that perspective. But I think that's everything we need to see about the malty and yeasty side of the aroma. Now the green component in this one is kind of interesting. For me, this has got quite a wet green component to it. I'm getting a little touch of earthiness, which is most likely to be the mosaic in this beer. But the noble character that you get of Mandarin Bavaria is likely to contribute to that as well, no matter how high in alpha acid the German hops are, be it, you know, Hallertau Blanc at 11% or Mandarin Bavaria at 8%. There are a few newer ones coming out as well, from what I understand. You always get that kind of smooth and bright German noble character, and you can get that in this beer quite a bit. But for me, there's a little bit of the stronger earthiness from the Mosaic. You've got a little bit of the smoother earthiness and the slightly herbal character from the Mandarin of Bavaria. But then you've got a nice kind of bright floral character and a smooth grassiness on the front of the nose. But it still has that wee bit of brightness. Very distinctly noble in that sense. But remember, when it comes to IPAs, there are 3 different kinds of hoppings that you can use. Early, late and dry hopping. So New England IPAs tend to rely on late addition and dry hopping, so their green components are a bit brighter, whereas West Coast IPAs use all 3, and their green components are a bit more kind of deep and dank. So early addition hopping is usually done within the first hour of the wort boil, gives you mainly flavour and gives you mainly mainly gives you the bitterness actually of the beer. Brain isn't working. Late addition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil, that gives you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. Dry hopping after the wort boil is complete is all about the flavour and aroma. So yeah, that's the thing to keep in mind here. On the fruity side of this beer, this is quite an orangey leaning one, which you would expect when it comes to the hop profile in this beer. But that said, you do still get a little bit of the kind of slightly stronger passion fruit and grapefruit from the you still get a little bit of that slightly stronger passion fruit and grapefruit from the Citra in this one. Juicy mango in there as well, but yeah, not as complex in its tropical fruits as the other one was from what I remember. But like I say, you do get a big orangey, tangerine component from this one. It's really nice and oily. But as you guys will know, if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I'm a sucker for an orangey leaning IPA. So this one is kind of showing me a lot of what I would want from the style actually. So yeah, this beer I think is going to be right up my street for a number of reasons. But yeah, mainly the kind of oily orangey character. But yeah, aroma wise, this is quite interesting, and as I say, quite different from the Satarnicus that we reviewed a few videos ago. So as I always say, take a little bit of time and go over the aroma of the beer. Just take it in and enjoy it. Always have the experience when it comes to craft beers and whiskies and sakes and stuff like this. But I think it's about time that we try this one. So yeah, this is the Wokealist. A 6.4% New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Spike Brewery in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. That's nice. I do like how that goes together. Yeah, I mean, straight away, this beer is very, very different from the Satarnicus, that's for sure. This is a little bit more along the lines of what we've had from Spike over the years. But still, in some ways, it is different too. What I would say about this beer, it's quite... Compared to the aroma, this one is a little bit more oaty leaning. I was feeling it was quite balanced in the aroma between the barley malt, the oats and the wheat. So yeah, this one is quite different in the malty base really diverges from the aroma quite a little bit in that sense. But the fruity and green component are kind of what you'd expect. So an interesting beer for sure, but this is kind of what you get with Spike. The one thing I would say to you guys, if you're encountering this brewery for the first time, if you see an IPA from Spike Brewery with the word, with business in the name, those are always worth trying. They tend to be a little bit bigger and more kind of punchy and things. This one is a bit more of a session or a drinkable New England IPA in a sense, but still, this is one of the more oily offerings I think I've had from Spike Brewery over the years too. But a nice beer, I will say that. It's got that nice oily orangey character to it, so right up my street. So yeah, thumbs up to them for this. Let's break this beer down though and describe it a wee bit more kind of in depth, if you like. So, where do we start with this? Middle third of the palate. You can feel the backbone of this beer. You've got that lovely kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. That just forms the backbone of the beer. Above that, or well, toward the front of that middle third of your palate, there is a little touch of woodiness in there, and then above that you have the Jacob's cream cracker note. What I would say about this is that there are quite a few components in that malt base that are what we were picking up in the aroma, definitely. But it's just the combination of things in the beginning wasn't quite what I expected. So yeah. But yeah, in terms of that, above the kind of crackery layer, you've got this lovely wholemeal brown bready type note coming out of the beer, which I do really enjoy. So you've got the Jacob's cream cracker note, you've got a little bit of a sweet wholemeal brown bread, then you've got the fluffier white bread above that, and then you've got more of a kind of dense, meaty character sitting above there as well. So yeah. So yeah, the kind of dense, white bready, wheaty component coming out of this beer is also quite nice. I'd say though the wheat in this beer, in the middle third of the palate at least, it acts more as a kind of smoothing agent. And then above the wheat you've got the oaty component of the beer. So down the middle line of your palate you can feel there is a little bit of creaminess there, but I actually find this beer is a little bit more kind of it's a little bit drier in terms of its oaty character, and as I said before, that's always a sign of that's usually a sign of the age of the beer. Because the wetter the oats are, the creamier they are, the fresher the beer is, the drier they are, the older the beer tends to be. So you can always use oats as a bit of an indicator with New England IPAs. But yeah, you can feel down the middle line of your palate there is a little bit of creaminess there, but as you move out toward the edges of your palate, the oats just get that little bit drier, and the oats sit above the kind of densifying wheaty layer. And this beer isn't overly sweet, actually, when I think about it as well. So yeah, in the middle of your palate, in the dead centre, you can feel a little bit of that. You can feel that little circle there, and it's a kind of sweet. It's got a little bit of that sweet Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing to it. And as you move out toward the edges of the palate there, above the oats, you do get this little touch of a kind of almost McVitie's digestive, biscuity type character out of it. So yeah, the way that that goes together in this sense is really nice too. So yeah, flavour wise, this beer on the malty side of things is quite nice, and a wee bit, the one thing I would say about it is that the further into the aftertaste you go, you do get a little bit of sweetness from the kind of brown bready layer, but also from the actual sweet component of the beer as well. So yeah, that is quite interesting. I think that's everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate in this beer. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, then you get a little bit of bready build up in there. There's a wee bit of brown bread to it, and it still gives you that slightly sweeter character too. But then on the back third of the palate, you're getting similar layers, just in different densities. So the base of that back third of your palate is a little bit more kind of you get a little bit more graininess out of the bread crust, and as I've said before, more bitter and dry flavours tend to come out further back on the palate. The sweeter flavours come out further forward. But yeah, you've got that. You've got a little bit of that kind of more dry, grainy bread crust in there on the back third of the palate. Above that, you've got more of a kind of Jacob's cream crackery character, and then you can feel these are just that little bit drier. Then you get the sweeter wholemeal brown bready sort of thing and that is a little bit more, you know, that is a little bit more kind of homey. You can feel that layer is a little bit taller and a wee bit more airy, and you still get a little bit of sweetness out of it too. But then you've got the barley malt white bread above that, and again that's taller, more airy, and above all of that you have a wee bit more kind of wheaty bitiness coming out of the beer too. So yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that sense is very, very nice. Yeah, I would say that on the back third of the palate, the wheat, it's got a teeny bit of bitiness to it, but it's actually just very, very smooth. And then above that, above all of that, you've got a more kind of, you do have a little bit of a more kind of farmhousey kind of white bread quality in there. There's a little bit of honeycomb wrapped into it as well. I always get honeycomb in the back third of my palate with these New England IPAs for some reason. I just always get that. But yeah, this beer has that. But this is definitely more of a kind of, you know, classic European New England IPA for me than the last beer was. The last one had that little bit more farmhousey character to it. So, you know, in terms of picking which is your favourite out of these ones, it really depends on how you like your malt and yeasty character in your New England IPAs. But yeah, back third of the palate, as I say, the flavour is definitely taller, but then as you come further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, goes together really, really well. In terms of the hoppy side of things then, I think we've covered everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. The green component then, in the back corners of the palate, there's definitely a little bit of earthiness there, and that's from the Mosaic and the Mandarin of Bavaria. As you come further forward on the palate, you can feel it gets progressively more floral. You get a nice big oily floral character to this beer. Not overly bitter though, but then round the front curve of your tongue you get a little bit of a lighter grassy character as well, and it's got a wee touch of zestiness to it, which I have to say I do quite enjoy. Yeah, that is quite nice in this beer, I have to say. Yeah, on the I think on the green component, the floral notes you get are a bit more American, whereas the grassy side of things is a little bit more noble and German. Like I said earlier, the Mandarin of Bavaria is going to still give you some of that noble character, and you can feel a little bit of that in the smoothness of the earthy character you get in this beer too. For me, German noble hops are characteristically smooth in terms of their earthiness, but bright and still smooth in terms of the greener side of things too. But yeah, mainly floral in terms of its green component, I would say. But I think that covers everything we need to say about that. So let's look at the front third of the palate and the fruity side of the beer then. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up in there. And for me, again, it's quite a sweet, almost like slightly brown bready character that's in there. But the base of that front third of your palate, you've got a little bit more kind of bread crust. There's a wee touch of cracker, and then you've got a little bit of that sweet kind of brown bready note in there as well. But then above all of that, you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, the fruity character for me in this beer really is quite oily, to be honest with you. But I do like how it goes together. So at the back of the front third of your palate, there's a little touch of a more oily passion fruit in there. So yeah, a little touch of more oily passion fruit. I wouldn't say grapefruit in this beer, which is kind of interesting when you've got Citra in there. Citra can often show you that slightly stronger grapefruit. But yeah, quite a nice oily and soft passion fruit. Then you get the more straight up juicy mango, and as you reach the front, or as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, actually there's a little bit of a dry apricot and papaya type note in this one too. So yeah, this is it's quite interesting in that sense. You do get quite a little bit of tropical fruit out of this beer the further into the aftertaste that you go. But on the front half of that front third of your palate, it is more about the kind of oily orangey notes. So yeah, the oily orangey character that comes out of this beer is really quite nice, because you can feel the brighter tangerine of the Mosaic, but then you also get that more oily straight up orange from the Mandarina Bavaria in this one as well. So yeah, and there's maybe just a tiny little bit of lime behind the very front tip of your tongue with this beer as well, which will be from the Citra. The Citra can quite often show you a kind of lemon limey character, and that is appearing in this one. But yeah, the further into the aftertaste you go, I think you get progressively more of the kind of orange and tangerine out of the beer. So it gets a big thumbs up for me, this one. I do like how it all pieces together. So yeah, quite an oily New England IPA for sure, this one, and a bit more classic compared to what we, well, you know, a bit more classic of what we would expect from Spike Brewing, if that at all makes sense. But yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about the flavour of the beer, and we should move on to the mouthfeel now. So for me, this beer is kind of mid-bodied, pushing toward the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth. It's quite an oily beer, this one, I would say, rather than anything else. There's a little bit of creaminess to it, but for me, this is more of an oily New England IPA. In terms of the bitterness, I would say that it's kind of fairly standard, about 25, 30 IBUs, this one. Really not, I could even be tempted to settle on 25, because it doesn't really get that bitter into the aftertaste. The malt, we certainly said, it's got a little bit of dryness to it, a wee bit of smoothness, and you've also got a wee touch of breadiness in there. You've also got that little bit of sweetness as well, which I think is very, very nice. But yeah, lovely oily fruity character. There's a little bit of drier tropical note out of this one, but more oily orange kind of shining through the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, the way everything goes together in this beer, I think is very, very nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me, this one. Really big orangey IPA, this one. It leans more toward the kind of wheaty and oaty side of things on the New England spectrum as well, the further into the aftertaste you go. But quite an interesting beer. Very different from the kind of more farmhousey offering that was the Satanicus that we reviewed a few videos ago. So yeah, interesting releases from Spike Brewery this month. I'm curious to see what they're going to do next time round. But I think we can leave it at that for this beer. So this one was the Wokealist, a 6.4% New England IPA from Spike Brewery in Gamlestaden in Gothenburg. An interesting beer to kind of ponder over. I hope you guys have enjoyed my take on this one. So let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Spike Brewery as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again later on next month. They've probably got a few beers coming out then. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Spike Brewery's social media, and have a go at some of their beers if you get the chance. Like I said, the business series always tends to be pretty good. Until then, slàinte, skål, cheers, see you guys in the next review.